Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Kodiak Shack podcast. Today we have Arun from OpsLab, which we are lucky to talk to him because he has the automated scheduler, the scheduler that I've been talking about that they have been attempting to create since the 80s. And Arun thinks he's cracked the case on this one. So Arun, thanks for being here. And so go ahead and give us your background, kind of tell us about yourself and the company you're working for.
Yeah, thank you, Veda. Thank you for inviting me. This is really exciting. Hello, everyone. My name is Arun Nair. I'm the founder of OpsLab. OpsLab is a small business based out of Austin, Texas. We specialize in air logistics optimization. So we primarily work with commercial airlines and we help them with routing their planes. We help them schedule their pilots and flight attendants. And we also work in cargo optimization. And we are also working with the Air Force. We are very fortunate to work on this effort that Vera just mentioned about automated squadron scheduling.
Nice. Well, so how'd you guys get into it? Obviously, Arun and I have talked a few times before in my previous life, but how did you end up finding yourself at OpsLab and then also finding yourself working in the DoD space?
Yeah, I can give you the longer version of the story. So I started working in fintech. I spent about 11 years working on the Wall Street. I worked for large sell-side banks, connecting them to the exchange. So all the trade execution were performed on the platforms that we built. And it was all algorithmic trading. So essentially, the traders would establish the rules of operation, and we executed the trades automatically between the bank and the exchange. So I come from the background of building large enterprise software applications, managing large sets of data. And my co-founder, Sujeev, after he did his PhD in operation research, we actually both went to the same grad school in Texas A&M about 15 years ago. I feel pretty old now. So yeah, after his PhD, he worked in airline operations. So he was essentially looking at the problems around how to manage the disruptions, scheduling disruptions that airlines face daily. So there's one thing about building a plan for your planes and your crew and your cargo, but the things never go as per the plan, as you know, and within Air Force as well, right? So he was looking mainly at the problem of how to react to those disruptions that are happening in the schedule. So he built a lot of algorithms around that. So 3 years ago, we joined forces. I brought my experience of building large enterprise applications, and he built his expertise in designing these algorithms to handle schedule disruptions for the airline operations. So because of that, we started our journey focusing on the airline operations. So that's how we spent first 2 years of our journey. And then in 2020, I think it was like fall of 2020, we got connected to the Air Force leadership through this program called Small Business Innovation Research. So it was in phase one that we got a chance to showcase our technology that we had built for the airlines to manage their operations. We showed that technology to the leadership in Air Force. And it was specifically this team in MIT AI Accelerator. That's a initiative by Air Force, where there's a joint collaboration between MIT and Air Force to look at the machine learning AI initiatives and see areas in Air Force that they can actually apply those learnings. So they actually introduced us to the leadership at 56 Fighter Wing at Luke Air Force Base. And they basically made the connection and said they actually looked at all our work, the MIT AI team. And it's the same team that built Pugboard. That's another application that's being used for scheduling of squadrons. And when 56 Fighter Wing was working with MIT AI team, they learned that the use case for fighter squadron scheduling is very different. And that's why they made the connection to us. And that's how we got started. And that led us to move into phase two of SBIR program. And that's when Luke and 56 Fighter Wing took the lead of kind of shepherding us through phase two. And that started in August of 2021. And right now we are finishing phase two, where the objective is to build this application to automate the squadron scheduling. So that's kind of been the journey so far.
Yeah, that's pretty great. And I would say a lot of companies have somewhat of a similar experience. You know,
Yeah,
they get into the space with a phase one, and then they get in that customer discovery. They find a customer, they get
yeah,
into a phase two. And so I think one thing that's kind of exciting, which I believe is relatively recent news, and I'll let you speak to it, but that phase two to the phase three is always a
yeah.
big hurdle. So, how did your company and organization kind of handle that challenge? And then what kind of updates do you have for everybody with your progress?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first part regarding phase two. Where I have to say a lot of credit has to go to the end users. So we got the chance to work with about three wings bases very actively. So first was Luke Air Force Base, second was Holloman. So you were our point of contact there. And we were also working with Davis Mountain and Shepherd. And I have to say, while talking to other companies that are also in this ecosystem going through Cyber Phase 2, a lot of times they complain about the lack of interaction with the end user. They feel they are not getting enough feedback from the end users, or they're not getting that drive. In this case, the end users are extremely motivated. I'm sure you are also aware of it. But I have to say, we were extremely happy to see that engagement and see the push come from the end users. And that has been a big factor contributing to the success of phase two. Uh, they were involved all the way from the schedulers who are working in each of the squadron, all the way up to wing command, and even the contractors who are working on the system of record, which is GPINs for you. The contractors are extremely supportive. They all feel this is a very critical project. That's something that needs to be addressed, and that has been a big reason for the success. And from our side, we were able to leverage a lot of algorithms that we had built for the commercial airlines. So we were also not starting from scratch. So we were able to repurpose a lot of the work that we had already done in the past 2 years with the airlines. So those were the two big reasons why our phase two journey was pretty successful. And the other part is we did get approved for phase three, which is a prime contract that we have now with Luke Air Force Base, and that is for essentially rolling out this platform for sustainment at Luke for four squadrons. Two of the squadrons are F-16 MDS, and the other two are F-35 MDS. And the contract is currently to kind of a trial, sustain it for a year, and prove that this platform can actually do what it's supposed to do.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So so one of the things, let's kind of dive into the process or the problem set. So
Mhm.
I'll let you kind of give your example or kind of explain what the automated squadron scheduler is attempting to do. And
Yeah.
then I'll kind of give the background of, hey, what are the pilots doing currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, the problem is all around scheduling these quadrant operations. If you're looking at FTU base like Luke or Holloman, they have all these students who are going through syllabus execution for their FTU programs. And that usually involves three kinds of events that they have to go through in their syllabus. They have to first go through academic lectures, then they have to go through simulator sessions, and they have to then go and fly real sorties for whatever MDS and the course that they're executing. The scheduling of academics and sims portion is not that complicated. However, when it comes to scheduling the sorties, it is an extremely complicated process. You have a lot of attributes that you have to orchestrate to successfully run the schedule. You have to think about the syllabus events because it's a very well structured syllabus event. The students have to go through prereqs and then they're qualified to attend the next mission or event. We have to look at the airspace allocation. That itself is a very complicated requirement where a specific mission requires a specific air range to be effective. So you have to make sure you have the right airspace schedule. You have to work with maintenance and work with the turn patterns that has been committed by the maintenance. And only then you can schedule those. You also have to work with maintenance team on the SCL weapon configuration. So every mission has their own specific SCL configurations. You have to look at the qualification of the instructor pilots. So if you are teaching a specific event, there are some currencies and qualifications that have to be active. So if you think about all these attributes, it's a lot to manage. And unfortunately, the current state of affairs is all of it is done manually by a team of schedulers, and that's comprised of usually a director of operations of the squadron, and they usually have about two or three civilian schedulers, and then they usually also have two or three instructor pilots. These are fully qualified fighter pilots sitting in scheduling shop, at least on an average spending 10 to 15 hours a week. So if you think about the amount of manpower that goes in building the schedule and then reflowing the schedule is a huge waste of manpower. And that's the kind of the main crux of the problem we're trying to solve is how can we automate this whole process where we are first building the schedule for the long range. So we are building the schedule for next 2 or 3 months based on looking at all the students that are flowing through your squadron. And then more importantly, focus on the reflows. And that's where our company's main expertise comes into play, where we can look at a disruption, which could be a maintenance cancellation, or it could be a student hooking the ride, or it could be a weather related cancellation. How do you reflow the entire week's schedule while also respecting the priorities set by the director of operations? Because it's not as simple as saying, okay, let's just fly the next student. You always have to look at the priorities set by the DO to make sure you're going in the right direction and all the resources are getting utilized for the right objectives. So our algorithms are focusing on disruptions a lot, managing the reflows for the squadron scheduling as well. And that's kind of the main crux of the problem.
Yeah, and so to kind of give some context and just help people kind of understand. So at least for the F-16, we've got like Arun was saying, some SCLs. So we call them SCALs. It's your configuration. So it's, hey, is this air to air configured? Can I do dogfighting in this, or can I do air to ground in it? Does it have a targeting pod? All those kind of things go into it. So it's not as simple as this jet isn't broken, so I can go use it. It's like, whoa, is that jet configured correctly so I can use it? In addition, one thing you said previously I thought was very appropriate. You said, man, we have so much end user buy-in. And like we started the podcast, because this is like a 50-year long problem set that people are like, I desperately want a solution. So the first time everybody hears about it, they think, well, hopefully this is the one, because we've heard, it's the problem solved before. But then people actually hear, one, your background with dealing with disruptions in the private sector. So you already understand that our flying schedule is wrought with disruptions. Like it has probably more disruptions than correct beginning to end execution. So I think that's why everyone was so interested in participating and providing input and being helpful and kind of pushing it to the next level, because we knew how big of a game changer this program could be. So I'll give like a quick rundown on Arun talked about what his program is doing. I'll tell you how many hands go in to now do what the program can do, but how many different people. So he said there's multiple contractors involved that are, their sole job is to build schedules, build shells. So what our turn pattern is, how many planes we're flying, what our takeoff and land times are. So there's contractors that do that. Then there's military members who actually oversee that and then actually throw individuals into each sorties and schedule upgrades. And that's just in scheduling. And then, like you said, the director of operation is kind of overseeing all this. But then beyond them, we have an entire shop called the training shop. And the training shop job is literally to manage and track training, because these programs are supposed to track training. But the problem is that training, think of it as in a raw data, we have the training information. But scheduling doesn't want to get that data in a raw data form. They want it in something that's more digestible. So we have a whole shop that's normally 1 to 2 people who just boil down the training information to, hey, scheduling, these are 5 or 6 things that you need to look for when it comes to pilot currencies. Because if someone hasn't flown a certain mission type in so many days, they can't lead it, or they need an instructor to make them current and qualified. So then you have these limitations. So it's not just airplanes, it's not just weathers, it's not just turn patterns, it's not just airspace. it's also what are our pilots' availabilities, what's their currencies. So we have a training shop that does that. And then we have a standards and evaluation shop, which runs everyone's check rides. And all of these things are managed by different people. So it becomes a very large problem affecting everyone in the squadron when the schedule isn't done well. So that's why I think so many people want this to be successful and kind of go places. Some of the things, having seen the program in the past, and Stinger was actually on the podcast a couple weeks ago talking about the disruptions parts and the reflow. And so can you kind of talk to what it's looking at and what it's providing to people? So, hey, today we had weather cancellations. What does that do to tomorrow? And what does the automated scheduler do to alleviate that problem?
Yeah, so I can take a simple example to explain the scenario. So let's say that a student is flying today, and based on the successful completion of today's sortie, they have consecutive events on the syllabus. That could be doing a sim on Thursday or flying the next sortie on Friday. But the completion of today's event is critical for that, right? So it just so happens that the student hooks the ride. He did not effectively clear that mission. In that case, currently the schedulers have to look at the entire week schedule and somehow make sure the student can fly again sometime before the Thursday event, right? That way he's able to keep proceeding forward. So in order to do that, you have to steal someone else's flying. So they usually go and sacrifice instructor pilot who may be flying for continuous training, or they might down prioritize some other student who may not be a critical student to graduate on time. So it's all about looking at what the DO is thinking about prioritization of all the resources, right? So it involves looking at the whole week schedule and kind of rebuilding the entire week schedule while looking at all these prioritization of who needs to graduate first on time and so and so, right? Now, if you think about how a human scheduler has to do all of this, they have to look at the whole schedule and literally involve sometimes rebuilding the entire week schedule, which could take 10 to 20 hours, right? And then the DO has to go approve it. What we are trying to do is essentially use these algorithms that can look at the DO's objective. We always start with that. What is DO trying to do? Is he trying to make sure these few students graduate on time? So our system allows you to kind of configure that. For every student, you can lock the graduation date, right? So that allows the solver to kind of work backwards and make sure that if the student that hooked the ride today, if he was a high priority student, then we will ensure that he gets to refly again before the next event on Thursday. We will make sure that he gets to refly again. And that might involve, again, displacing an instructor pilot who may be flying a CT sortie, or displacing another student who is lower in the priority list that's given by the DO, right? So we build the entire week schedule trying to minimize the number of changes, because while we are building the schedule to optimize the resource utilization, we're also trying to make sure the work-life balance for the pilots is not disturbed, right? So you don't want to create a very jerky week schedule for the pilots where they don't know what they're flying tomorrow. That's kind of something we would like to avoid all the time as well. So what the goal of the solver is always to look at the DO's objective, prioritize flying for the high priority students while maintaining the work-life balance for the pilots. And we look at all three schedule events. So we look at their academics, sims, and sortie events, because they all are tied together based on the syllabus flow. So we reflow all three event types for the entire squadron. And as far as the performance is concerned, it takes us less than 5 minutes to build a full squadron schedule. And the volume is pretty small because usually every squadron has 20 to 25 tails on an average. So managing the reflows takes less than 5 minutes for the solver.
Well, it's kind of funny when you think, in a fighter squadron who in the Air Force, at least F-16s, they actually put out a lot of lines. Not all fighters are putting out 12 turn 10s. So we think, hey man, that's a lot of airplanes moving in one day.
Yeah.
But having worked in the private sector
Yeah.
with commercial airlines, you're like, you're flying 20 airplanes in one day and they all take off and land at the same location. Like that's pretty easy, but we have our own set of issues to deal with, I guess.
No, Veda, you're absolutely right. But on the commercial airline side, our customer, for example, right now has we work with Republic Airways. That's the customer we have in North America, and they fly close to 32,000 flights a month, and they have about 7,000 pilots and flight attendants. And we look at their reflows, and for them, on an average, if there are, let's say, 20 or 30 cancellations, that usually impacts 80 to 100 crew members. We are able to resolve disruptions of that magnitude in less than 12 minutes. That's kind of where it lasts. But I have to say, for squadron scheduling, you have wider sets of variables that are impacting the scheduling. So that gives you a different level of complication.
Yeah, because you think, they are pretty much all, aside from very few kind of the initial qual flights for those pilots and stewardesses, that's their limitation. It's availability. And then, hey, pretty much everybody's qualified in that aircraft. It's just, are they geographically located or can they get there? And they have an entire fleet of people who are kind of sitting reserve, who are ready to kind of fill in, where in the operations squadrons, there's just not hey, there's 12 people sitting just waiting for you to call and let them know that, they got picked up. So we'll kind of shift gears real quick. So kind of two questions, just one is, where do you feel you kind of got the most bang for your buck or made the most impact with contacting people and getting the word out there about your program? Mm-hmm. And then two, kind of how much are you traveling kind of in this industry? I know COVID probably put a damper on it, but getting out there, kind of talking to people, what does that look like for you?
So the first piece, I would say the Spark Cell initiatives at each of these wings and bases, that's been extremely helpful. So we got the opportunity to work with some Spark Cell leads like Captain Wesley Reed and yourself, and we have similar point of contacts at other bases like Shepherd and Davis Mountain. And the network of Spark Cell leads is pretty strong. The good thing is if we are working with Luke and if they like our work and if the Spark Cell lead is tracking that initiative, then they are pretty good at communicating that in your ecosystem of Spark Cell leads. And that has, I feel, been the most impactful way of getting the word out about our efforts. And as far as the travel is concerned, I am traveling a lot right now. We are right now essentially traveling to all the bases that have shown interest in potentially working with us. So that the process usually involves showing them the product virtually first on Zoom. And usually they invite their schedulers, and they usually will keep it limited to the instructor pilots who are actively involved in the process. And if they like the demo, then they invite us to the base for in-person visit. And that's when they invite the wing leadership. And then that's when we kind of do the full demo of the application, kind of do a 1 day long workshop with them, understand their exact requirements. Most of them are flying different MBS. They are not flying F-16 or F-35. That's what the platform is originally configured for. So that workshopping helps us a lot to understand the requirement. We are traveling a fair amount, going to all these bases. Like we were in Minot Air Force Base a couple of weeks ago in North Dakota, or going down to Albuquerque area for Holloman. So definitely it's been a fun phase actually.
Yeah, it was a good call going to Minot in the summer. I hear the winters are rough out there.
Yeah, I hear that too.
So one of the things that I had, well, actually, before we get to that, how was it? So you went out to Minot. I assume you were talking with the B-52s up there.
Yeah.
How was it? How did it differ? So now we have F-16s. You have a pilot
Yeah.
and then you have maybe a IP or an instructor pilot sitting
Hmm.
in the back seat when you're at
Exactly.
the formal training course.
Hmm.
But now you go to the B-52 and you've got a pilot, you've got a co-pilot, you've got a nav, you have a WISO, so weapon
Yeah.
systems operator, and then maybe one more. But so how is that? They're flying less lines, but how is that from your perspective?
Yeah, we got a chance to actually play with their simulators. So we got a chance to see all these positions that you mentioned. It was actually a really good experience getting to understand what they go through. So basically, yeah, Vedo, you nailed it. Our biggest customization effort for every new MDS is all about the crew positions, right? So when we move from commercial airline to F-16, for commercial airlines, you usually have a pilot and a first officer in the cockpit, and then you have flight attendants. You may have four flight attendants, sometimes six, depending on the size of the airplane. And when we moved to F-16, we had to deal with just one single-seater C model or double-seater D models. Now, as we are expanding to B-52, we have to now expand the crew positions to handle all these positions that you mentioned. So that's kind of the biggest lift for us as we go from one MBS to the next. However, if we are going from one base to another, however, if they're both flying the same MDS that we have already configured, then it is a lot easier journey for us. So, for example, going
Mm.
from Loop to Holloman, since they both fly F-16s, is a much easier journey. When we go to Minot, or we are also working with Kirtland for C-130s, even there it will require different crew positions for us.
Would you say, I would assume in my ignorance, I would assume that having more crew positions with more mission types is much more difficult than just having a different MDS. So say hey, I'm a F-16 base, now I move to a A-10 base. That's probably much more similar
Yeah,
than saying, hey, now I have 5 variables or
exactly,
C-17s or something like that.
exactly.
Yeah.
However, the good thing is
So
once
the
we
one of
scale
the
up to B-52 use case, where you have to deal with at least 5 to 6 positions, and you may have up to like 10 pilots in the same sort of crew formation. Uh, Moving to C-130s will not be that difficult because their positions are not very different. They are different, but because we are already scaling up to 5 or 7 different types of positions, that migration should not be that difficult.
Yeah, I respect that. You said just give us the most difficult problem set out the gate, and if we can figure that out, we can get all the rest. Did you get to check out? I've always imagined. I've never been in a B-52, at least while it's flying. I've always imagined like the Wizzo is just like listening to radio and clicks and beeps and stuff, and they're like,
Yeah,
oh, that's what that radio frequency is. Is that what they did in the
yeah,
sim?
exactly. But it's a
Yeah.
very interesting position. I mean, they are strategizing so much. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd say one thing, I have the benefit of kind of being by myself in the airplane,
Yeah,
which the crew coordination is non-existent. It's either I
yeah,
do it or I don't. But working across other aircraft, so there's one of my friends or three of my friends with me in a four ship formation is that's where our coordination
yeah,
comes in. But you think trying to execute in one of those big airplanes and coordinate with everybody and everybody be on the same page is probably a challenge in and of itself. We always
yeah,
joke in the single seat community, we refer to things as SA or situational awareness, and
yeah.
you say there's only 100% SA, so either one person has it all or you just divide that amongst the people in the airplane, and which is not a good thing because like, oh cool, I have 12% of the SA. Probably making some enemies today.
Yeah.
So one question I have, which I think is on a lot of people's minds because
Yeah.
I've had this conversation over and over and over, is funding.
Mhm.
So what happened? Because one of our conversations right before I left was, man, funding's tough. So what transpired? And I don't know how much you can talk about, but
Sure.
what happened that all of a sudden there were funds available?
Yeah, so definitely for most companies going through cyber phase two, this is a very common theme that it's called the valley of death. It's a very common terminology these days, where the companies will prove the viability of the product by delivering the phase two, and then there's usually not funding secured for sustainment of the application, right? That's kind of allows you to succeed in that. In our case, we also are kind of going through the same journey where we are working on a bottom-up approach, right? We are working with squadrons initially rather than working directly with the MatchCom and coming down. So right now we are basically trying to work with the AFWorks funding for phase two. That allowed us to build a minimum viable product that we are launching this fall. And then we are relying on squadron innovation funds. That's one source of funding that we are kind of banking on. So as we are working with each of these wings, some of the squadrons are able to come up with some squadron innovation funds. They are usually not big checks; they are small checks. So that's helping us. Luke was able to secure a prime contract for us for sustainment of this application for a year. So that contract was awarded just this month, and that it gives us some runway to at least prove the model for next 1 year for day-to-day use case, right? It's not simulation, it's not working on testing, it's actually scheduling the real sorties for both F-16 and F-35. And that was one good source of funding we were able to secure. And the other one is, in fact, just this morning we got the confirmation of this. Is a new initiative called Momentum Fund, and this is started by the Chief of Air Force, CSAF. This fund is essentially to help drive the success of these smaller initiatives that are started by these squadrons, right? So it's similar to SIF, where there is some funding given to essentially accelerate the deployment and sustainment of such initiatives. So we were able to secure some of the funding as part of Momentum Fund for two use cases. One is to prove that this can also be used for ACC. So we are saying that this platform can not only help with the pilot training, FTU, and UPT use case, but also help with your continuous training, readiness awareness program, and mission readiness as well. So we have been asked to prove this for ACC MatchCom. And also the third MatchCom that we're working with is the Global Strike Command, and that's where Minot comes in. So we will be proving this application can also work for the third MatchCom. So the goal is to prove this for ATC while working with Luke and Holloman and such. Work with ACC, and we are planning to work with Davis Monson for that, and then work with Global Strike Command and prove this with Minot. So the Momentum Fund that just got approved this morning will help us with the rollout of these two additional bases.
Yeah, I feel like I can't help but think it was my input complaining about how there's not sustainment funding. So the CSAF must listen to this podcast. That's all the confirmation I need. Yeah. So one of the things, I have a question. We've talked about this offline previously. So why do you think some companies, and how do you think some companies start at the top? How do you think these companies walk in the door and go straight to COMAC, so the commander of ACC, and have a meeting and they get funding versus everyone else has to go SBIR 1, SBIR 2, and then hope for a SBIR 3?
I honestly don't know that. I'm assuming the companies that are going directly to the leadership at MatchCom are larger contractors. If you're a smaller company like ourselves, you're likely going through SBIR phase 1, phase 2, where you're likely not starting from the top at the MatchCom headquarters level. You're likely starting from bottom approach. So I honestly don't know how, if you were a small company, how could you directly start with working with the leadership?
Well, I think that was one of the things, maybe it's my subconscious, but I feel like I randomly just plug my own podcast on my podcast, but that's fine. I think that was one of the things that I was frustrated about, was there would be companies that are making good products, are doing good work, are making progress and making good on the contract that the Air Force asked them to do. And then nobody would know about them. And I heard a story about, I believe it was you actually, that was at a conference and you were like, hey, this is our program. we can't seem to get funding. And then like half the audience stood up and was like, we would like that too.
Yeah.
But they didn't know about it. They didn't know it
Yeah.
existed.
Right.
And you're like, man, I would love for there to be some way, because you know, Spark Cells, everybody has their story of how a Collider event or something like that,
Yeah.
or Spark Cells got the word out.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's very apparent that it's not a broad enough spectrum of deployment of information, because people still don't know. A lot of people who would want this program still don't know about it. So what do you think? Do you think there's stuff out there that I'm unaware of, or do you think that is kind of a gap in the development?
No, I think rather things like these innovation work groups that are conducted across these wings, those are really good areas for companies like ourselves who are executing SIBRs. If they can get participation into those workshops, those are really good ones because we usually have subject matter experts from the end user side attend those workshops. And you also have other technology leaders from within the Air Force also attend those workshops. So if companies like us get the invite to these workshops, then they actually prove to be very beneficial in spreading the word about
Okay.
the initiatives and if there are any conversations about funding. So that definitely helps a lot.
And then, so can who kind of hosts those? Where are they held? Kind of give people, if they're looking to attend one of these, where would they find that?
So usually these are again through SparkCell. We get the invite because the SparkCell leads are usually connected very well. But there's one team in Tucson called ArcWorks, ARCWERX. They're like AppWorks, but and they host some really good innovation work groups focusing on uh, the Tucson, Luke, Phoenix area. So a lot of bases actually attend those workshops. We recently were invited to attend a workshop in Orlando that was focusing purely on pilot training operations. So a lot of folks focusing on VR and AR were invited, and that's where we also got a chance to talk about our efforts. So essentially, for us, it's still happening through Spark Cell leads. That's again, I know I'm going back to that. Uh, but eventually, if we are able to get participation into these innovation workshop, they help a lot.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear that opportunity is out there for companies, because
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things a lot of people struggle with is getting some exposure out there and showing off the
yeah.
good things that they're doing. What would you say? Kind of the perks of the gig. What would you say one of your favorite experiences or trips has been to one of these locations?
I think hands down, visiting the bases, I really enjoy that, going and taking a tour of all the different types of aircrafts, be it T6 or T-38 at Shepherd or F-16, F-35 at Luke or B-52 at Minot. I think that's my favorite part. I actually really nerd out on that.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's. I think a lot of people, having talked to a few companies, they enjoy that as
Yeah,
well. And speaking from the military member previously, the I enjoyed it too. Getting to
yeah,
share that with you guys and getting to say, hey, this is our job and this is what we really enjoy doing, and we enjoy sharing that with people who are trying to help us and work with us and stuff.
yeah.
So that's pretty good. It's always enjoyable there.
Later, there's one
That's
more going back to the point you mentioned about what helps companies kind of get your message out about the efforts and such. Uh, So we work in an incubator in Austin. Essentially, it's called Capital Factory. It's based in Austin. So I do want to give a shout out to Capital Factory as well because they do a really good job of inviting leadership from Air Force, Navy, Army, and they basically make the connection with the startups like ourselves who are working at Capital Factory. And because of that, also we were getting a lot of face time with the leadership from the Air Force, and we got some really good connections because they host a lot of events in Austin, and being in Austin helps as well because there's a lot of presence from Air Force, so that also helped us a lot.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, Austin seems kind of like the new Silicon Valley, at least for the defense
Exactly.
innovation, just because there's so many people there, and really the benefits of Austin and AFWorks being there, and Capital Factory.
Yeah.
But the additional nice thing, and I don't know if you've experienced this at all, but you're just down the road from Randolph, which is
Yeah.
19th Air Force and AETC headquarters.
Exactly.
So if you do have meetings, if you have to just get there, that's an easy trip. Just drive down the road for about 90 minutes, and then you're at pretty much the innovation hub for Air Education Training Command in 19th Air Force.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
So there's one program we haven't talked about that we kind of worked on previously, and then I'm just looking to get an update there. So on the airspace scheduler,
Yeah.
how's that one going?
Yeah, so we attended a couple of workshops. Those were again going back to the innovation work groups that were hosted in Tucson by Artworks. That was the last year in fall, and that allowed basically we had participation from all these wings that share the BMGR air range in Phoenix. So these are Luke, and you have Tucson, Arizona National Guard, and and Davis Mountain. So these were the active wings participating. And we also worked with Holloman on the Wismar use case. And we submitted a proposal to AFWorks for Direct to Phase 2. That was in the previous cycle. And unfortunately, even though our proposal was selected based on technical merit, we did not get funded because AFWorks did not have enough funding in the last cycle. So as of now, it's kind of stuck in that phase where we are planning to resubmit that in the current cycle and see if this time we get lucky with funding. But right now, that effort is currently stuck there. So what we are doing is we are covering some of the use case for airspace scheduling as part of our current initiative for squadron scheduling. So at least from the squadron scheduler's perspective, we are handling all of the airspace scheduling as well. So we are preparing the request based on the mission you're flying for a given week and such. However, when it comes to the range management office work flows, that piece is something that we will be building once we get funded with the airspace management project.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's. I mean, it's good that AFWorks says like, "Hey, we like this program."
Yeah.
It's not that we don't like the program; it's just we don't have funding.
Mhm.
One question I always have, and back me up if I'm misunderstanding this, but it seems like the SIBR, so the Small Business Innovation Research, the way they award the contracts is in windows. So they open a
Yeah.
window, they close it, then they open a new window, then they close it, and it seems like that happens March through July, I think. Maybe August is when the final kind of the open one ends. Is that right?
I think they change the cycle every year.
Okay.
They sometimes have 3 to 4 cycles a year. This time,
Mm-hmm.
this year, they skipped the June cycle altogether. So I think I would say it's better to track that on the SIBR website because they clearly show you all the cycles that are open and what are the upcoming cycles. So they do a pretty good job of educating people on what are the various programs that they can participate in and what are the timelines for those as well. So I have to say, AFWorks does a great job of helping companies like us understand when we are new to this process. They have a pretty good team of folks, answering all our questions, hosting weekly all hands meet. So they do a pretty good job with that.
Well, that's good. The so what do you do kind of from your side? Obviously, when the SIBR windows are open, everybody's trying to get paperwork
Yeah.
done to get those submitted on time and correctly. But when all that closes, say July, August,
Mhm.
September timeframe, until March of the next year, what keeps you busy aside from trying to build the programs?
So I would say there are usually 3 to 4 cycles open. So we do try to submit proposal in those cycles. And then besides SBIR, there are other funding opportunities as well. For example, National Science Fund has a program. Then Space also has a different program. So we do have multiple avenues where you can compete in these bids. And internally, so we don't rely on any third-party companies to write proposals for us. We do all of this in-house because we have a team of PhDs in operation research. So, writing proposals is something that we have done it organically. So that keeps us busy as well. We do write a fair amount of proposals. But yeah, besides that, what keeps me busy is I also split half of my time on the commercial sector. So that also helps. And I think it's really good for bringing the innovation from commercial sector into DoD sector and vice versa. So that's something I enjoy doing a lot.
Well, and I think that's probably a great business model of writing all your contracts and your presentations in-house, because nobody knows your program better than you guys.
Yeah.
And you're going to be your own biggest advocate. And then you have that knowledge in your corporate. That's corporate knowledge now. That's not, hey, we paid this consulting company to do this for us, and then in 4 months later we need something else, and you're like, well, we don't know how to do that still. So yeah, so that's good. And I think that's one of the things that some people get worried about is leveraging innovation to kind of solve problems, is the fact that they're like, well, I don't know how to fix it, and some of our problem sets are so big that no pilot should ever be like, oh, my secondary duty is just programming a automated scheduler. So we need to leverage people like yourselves and programs like OpsLabs to generate these products. But how do you think? So say we get, because like you said, this SBIR 3 is a 1-year test, and I hope the test goes extremely well for me and all my friends. What do you say if at the end of that, the Air Force is like, hey, we can't find any money? Like, how does the Air Force lean on the program and use it, and then find all the goodness out of it, and then lose it? Like, what is the recourse there? I mean, at some point you can't just be there without any contract, right?
Yeah, I think fortunately this momentum fund that has been approved will help us sustain it, right? So that will help us prove the use case not only with Luke for F-16 and F-35 and Holloman, but also will help prove the use case for other MDS, for other MATCOMs. So our hope is over the next 2 years, that's kind of the window we are looking at, where we want to roll out this application to as many wings as possible, preferably different types of MDS, not just the same. That way, we are able to prove that the system is not tailored for just one wing, right? So that's kind of what we are looking at, is next 2 years, roll it out to as many wings as possible. And part of the investment is also made by us. OpsLab is also putting our money and investment into it to fill the gaps where we don't find funding. For example, the SBIR Phase 2 helped us build the MVP, but we invested a lot of our own investments to kind of go beyond the basic requirements that were asked for. So we kind of worked on the long-term vision, build the product for next 5 years of roadmap. So we are also putting some of the investment because we firmly believe in this direction ourselves.
Yeah, nice. For SBIRs and a lot of contracts, there's a lot of matching funds. Is that accurate, that you actually get from like a venture capital type organizations? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So usually the process that startups follow is they would have some venture capitalists already interested in their initiatives. And let's say they're adding some money into it. I'm just going to say $2 million or $3 million. They're investing in the startup. And then the startup is also executing SBIR Phase 2. Then they are able to show the investments made by the VC and show that as matching funds contributed into the project. And AFWorks will then match the funding. It's usually 1:2 ratio. So for every $2 invested by VC, they will match $1. So that's an avenue as well. We have also applied for that matching fund. So we were able to show the investment coming from the end users like Luke and such, and show that as the matching fund to get the TAC-5 funding.
Well, that's awesome.
We are still waiting for the results. We don't know if that's going to get approved or not.
But I think that's whoever kind of came up with the SBIR program. I think they definitely had a good understanding, because the reality of, hey, we don't have enough money to make this viable and desirable for these companies. So let's leverage the, private equity and venture capital to help make this an enticing thing to actually get people who are really good in this space to build really good products, because there's a lot of amazing people that work in the military, and I don't think any of them do it for the big paycheck, that's not the area to make a lot of money. And I just don't think the money is there a lot of times in DoD funding. So it's definitely a smart way. So we get as good of a product as we can hope for in the space.
Yep.
Well, sweet. Arun, do you have any parting shots or anything before I let you go?
Just my contact information. If anyone wants to get in touch, my email address is arun@opslab.com. That's it.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll add it to the show notes. So if anybody wants, you can just scroll down and then you'll be able to see Arun's email there if you want to contact him. I'll also at you or the company on LinkedIn, so people can find you guys that way. And then please contact me at vader@kodiakshack.com if you want to be on the show, or if you want to just provide feedback, good or bad. Let us know what we're doing that you like and don't like, so we can work on that and make it better for everyone involved. And then check out the kodiakshack.com website, and you can see all these podcasts there, or our swag shop. Arun, thanks again for being on the show, and I appreciate it. Keep doing good work for all of us.
Thank you, Vader. This was a pleasure.
See you.